Round these parts, you ask anyone, they'll tell you the story of a stranger. He rides into town, righting wrongs for those too poor to go to the law. He works for cheap and won't ask for even a sip while he's on the job. If you've seen that random gaming fella, or any of a dozen other folks on the YouTube, you'll know him by his name, the GTX 750 Ti. But you see, this story is not about him, it's about his cousin, Quadro. With Kepler on its last legs, budget gamers are left looking to Maxwell to get their hit of bargain gaming goodness from Team Green, with the GTX 750 Ti being the obvious candidate for those who can't cover the cost of both a new GPU and power supply. There are, however, only limited numbers of these 2014 cult classics still on the market in 2021, and you might struggle to find the 4GB versions even at the best of times. If, like me, you were browsing around techpowerup.com and happened to notice that the Quadro K2200, a single-slot workstation card, uses essentially the same GPU and is available on eBay for £80 to £90, you might wonder, what's stopping you from buying one of these for gaming? What indeed? Today I'll be putting that question to the test with some of the most recent titles, as well as some slightly older favourites in the RPG PC. This isn't your standard test bench PC, as it's been built specifically to reflect the specs of some of the most common budget gaming PCs in use in 2021. Let's start the video by breaking my resolution. I've made a conscious decision to lay off GTA 5 this year, however I'm aware there's not a lot of gaming coverage on the Quadro K2200 on YouTube right now. I figure then that people are going to want to know how it fares in the game that just won't die. Well, at 1080 with quality set to high, the K2200 manages to hit an average of 62 FPS. The game actually defaulted to include some very high settings, which still ran absolutely fine at over 40 FPS. And just to get that other global phenomenon covered, Fortnite at competitive settings, that is 1080 low with view distance turned up to epic, can run at over 70 FPS on average on the K2200, with 1% lows as affected by server lag as anything. While this is more than playable for most people, you always have the option of performance mode if this isn't fast enough for your pro gamer skills. Call of Duty Warzone was already relatively heavy for a battle royale, and its performance on low-end hardware has declined steadily over the course of 2020 and 2021. Using OCAT, I recorded an average FPS of 42 at 720 low settings. Thanks to the 4GB of VRAM, I was able to turn texture quality and streaming up. Respawn's Battle Royale, Apex Legends, is a bit friendlier for low-end GPUs, and that means I can afford to run the K2200 at a higher resolution. I tested at 1600x900 low, with texture quality turned up, just because I could, and recorded an average FPS of 61. 1% lows unfortunately still dip into the 40s, so for a truly smooth experience, you might want to drop to 720. Personally, I would rather have the better visibility at the expense of the occasional frame dip, but I also suck at BRs. This was a pretty epic game of Rocket League, in which after remaining deadlocked for pretty much the entire game, I scored the tiebreaker from a glorious header with just 19 seconds left on the clock. 1080 quality settings, 127 FPS. Pretty good for a workstation card. And as if to signify the point in the video where frame rates take a drop, here's Cyberpunk 2077, running at 720 low at just 27 FPS. Even the larger VRAM buffer can't help us out here, as the card simply can't push frames out fast enough. Horizon Zero Dawn doesn't fare much better, though at 720 performance it can at least manage to stick above 30 FPS, with averages holding at about 33. Of course, I had the option to turn textures up to high, but frankly at 720 it's hard to tell. Valheim puts in a respectable showing here. At 720 medium the game runs at 52 FPS average, with lows into the 30s. As usual, because some developers don't put out finished games anymore, I have to point out that performance may change over time. Given that Kepler cards perform like shit in Doom Eternal, I wasn't sure what to expect from the K2200. Whatever I expected, it was probably too much. Maxwell or not, this card wasn't intended to outperform the higher end cards in the 700 series, and sure enough, it doesn't. I'd been a bit optimistic at first, trying 1080 low, and being rewarded with only 33 FPS on average. Dropping resolution scaling to 66% saw that climb to 44 FPS, though we're still looking at numbers way below those of even AMD's GCN1 cards. Forza Horizon 4, on the other hand, sees the K2200 way outperform the R9 270. 1080 medium scores over 40 FPS, which is roughly 20% faster than my former favourite low-end card, and actually only about 10% slower than the old mid-range GTX 670 based on Kepler. Resident Evil Village isn't the best experience on the K2200, though one doesn't have to be as careful with the VRAM limit as on other cards. Testing at 1080 with the performance preset and switching out interlaced rendering for FSR Ultra, I saw an average of 37 and lows of 29. You might want to consider dropping FSR down to quality, as this game does suffer from slowdown when the frame rate drops below 30. And as I said in my FSR deep dive video on the Ryzen 3 4350G, the quality difference is pretty minimal. Assassin's Creed Valhalla was the only game in my lineup that refused to launch on the K2200. Maxwell version 1 sadly doesn't have the full DX12 feature set, so unfortunately I had to skip that game this time. Instead I went with Ubisoft's other AAA 2020 game, Watch Dogs Legion. This one managed 34 FPS average at 720 low with medium textures. Again, because I can. So, is anything stopping you from using the Quadro K2200 for gaming? Honestly, no. This is, to all intents and purposes, a locked down 4GB GTX 750 Ti. By locked down, I mean that, as far as I can tell, there isn't a simple software solution that will allow for overclocking, undervolting, or any other type of control that would improve performance. Stock clocks are lower than many of the AIB 750 Ti's from ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte and so forth, so although the extra VRAM in this card may be beneficial in some games, this is likely to be overshadowed by the 750 Ti's faster clock speeds and better cooling. Should you buy one? Well, that depends on your current situation. This isn't really an upgrade from AMD Vega integrated GPUs, but it is a big step up from Intel HD graphics. For owners of most modern GPUs, you should probably look elsewhere for an upgrade. If you have an OEM pre-built like a Dell Optiplex Mini Tower, you may well have been considering picking up a GT 1030 or, heaven forbid, even a GT 710 until graphics card prices come back down to earth. In that case, this other single slot card with 4 gigs of GDDR5, no external power requirements, and better overall performance than those other cards, with 1 or 2 compatibility issues, might be worth looking at instead. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.